Well, hello and good morning, everybody. This is Perrin Lovett at the Prepper Post News, courtesy of Freedom Prepper. And happy Monday, December 14th, 2020 to all of you. I have been out here early and for some time playing with things like the lights, which I'm just trying to work on the shadow without blinding myself. And also my little video controller here has a hair trigger. So this is going to be a fun one, I hope. Thank you to everybody who tuned in last week at freedomprepper.com, where you can find all the links to all the stories every day, like today, and everybody over at freedompreppercommunity.com. It's growing and it's about to get a whole lot bigger. And all of you were great last week, adding all kinds of wonderful comments, and we want to keep that going. Today on YouTube, we want to have all your comments about our featured stories today down below the video. I think our record is something like 25 or 30, and with this video, I'd really like to boost that up to 50 if possible. And maybe by the end of the week, end of next week, maybe we can work on getting up to 100. We want to know what you think, and I see that some of you guys are starting to discuss things thread style, and that's excellent. That's what we're looking for. Also, keep the comments going at the community. Another big development, we want to say hello to the Angry Prepper and everybody at the Angry Prepper channel. Very excited to have all of you along, and hopefully we can pick up on some of your fantastic YouTube success. Now, I've got some very interesting stories today. The first feature is kind of a split deal today. One feeds into the next. Is about the YouTube situation. We had a video pulled. It was the Prepper Post News from November 18th, and that was pulled down, and we were suspended for all of last week from posting new material to the YouTube channel. Kind of a little vacation. The reason that was given, Scott got a notice that said that video contained inappropriate content. So I want to take a few minutes to discuss the guidelines because there have been some changes even last week while we were out. I just want to make sure that we're on the right side of everything in full compliance, as it were. So let me know what you think about that. I'm going to get straight into those guidelines. You know, I had toyed with the idea of inviting Miss Susan Wojcicki, who is the CEO of YouTube, or somebody else from YouTube, to join me in a not too distant future cast to discuss what happened in that video and what we did wrong. Because honestly, I don't know. I can't make corrections if I don't know what I did wrong. But then we had some other things that came up which seem a little bit more important. YouTube issued a statement on December 9th about their support of the U.S. presidential election, which is very, very important. So I've got a link to their statement at their blog, and I just want to read you some relevant information from it. Bear with me for a second. It's very important. Removing content that violates our policies, and I'm going to get into some of their policies in a second. Since September, we've terminated over 8,000 channels and thousands of harmful and misleading elections-related videos that violated our existing policies. And over 77% of those videos were removed before they even had 100 views. Somewhere in here they say they have 10,000 moderators and some computers helping, so they are Johnny on the spot taking out information that might mislead voters and mislead the public. We also work to make sure, and I just want to point out that I'm not even sure in that November 18th video that I even talked about the election. I might have mentioned it in passing, but again, I don't know. But moving on, we also work to make sure that the line between what is removed and what is allowed is drawn in the right place. Our policies prohibit misleading viewers about where and how to vote. I think we're past that part. We also disallow content alleging widespread fraud or errors change the outcome of a historical U.S. presidential election. However, in some cases, that has meant allowing controversial views on the outcome or process of counting votes of a current election as election officials have worked to finalize the counts. Yesterday, which would have been the 8th, was the safe harbor deadline for the U.S. presidential election, and enough states have certified their election results to determine a president-elect. That's when all the states certify the votes for the Electoral College. Happens every 4 years. Given that, we will start removing any piece of content today, the 9th, that misleads people by alleging that widespread fraud or errors changed the outcome of the 2020 U.S. presidential election, in line with our approach towards historical U.S. presidential elections, a new policy. For example, we will remove videos claiming that a presidential candidate won the election due to widespread software glitches or counting errors. And that's just an example, one of many. We will begin enforcing this policy today, the 9th, and will ramp up in the weeks to come. As always, news coverage and commentary on these issues can remain on our site if there's sufficient education, documentary, scientific, or artistic context. I'd like to point out that almost all of our information here at Prepper Post News is always for education, news, and sometimes even for scientific and artistic context. So we have those. I've got a link to the community guidelines. I've got to switch screens here. This is very important stuff, and most of this is boilerplate, not out of the ordinary. It's things that pretty much everybody agrees on. They don't allow things like fake engagement. I don't know what that is exactly, but nobody likes fakery. They don't like impersonation. Neither do I. I'm just me. Links in the content, I looked at this one. That means they don't want you linking to spammy kind of things, because they also prohibit spam, deceptive practices, and scams. Nobody likes a scam, and nobody likes spam popping up. Dangerous or violent content. No harassment and no cyberbullying. I believe in that. Harmful or dangerous content, get it out of here. We don't need it. Hate speech, no hate speech allowed. Violent criminal organizations, I don't like them either. It's good that they're prohibited. Violent or graphic content, no violence here. I believe in nonviolence. I'm a nonviolent, lovable little digital possum fumbling his way through the digital world. We've got the COVID-19 misinfo policy. I will cover that in a second. Also, there's a section on regulated goods, concerning content featuring firearms. Sometimes we talk about guns and in the news, and of course we talk about the Second Amendment, but I don't feature any guns, so we don't think we have to worry about that. And the sale of illegal or regulated goods is either illegal or regulated, and that doesn't affect us at all. Although I would like to remind you, we have Freedom Roasters coffee and 4 excellent strengths and flavors, getting some rave reviews. Please check that out. So let's take a look at this relatively new, I did not know about it, COVID-19 misinformation policy. Don't post content on YouTube if it includes any of the following: treatment misinformation, prevention misinformation. These are headers. I don't have time to read all of these. Diagnostic misinformation, transmission misinformation, and vaccine misinformation. Essentially what they do is they take the World Health Organization, the CDC information, and local health authorities' word on what is real, what is working, and so forth, and that sets the tone. So we will try to adhere to those policies. And I think they allow exceptions if you're pointing out that somebody is doing something wrong. You can say that is wrong and that is bad. God, it's so hard for a guy like me to switch screens like this. So just to sum that up, Ms. Wojcicki's policy, the policy of YouTube concerning the presidential election of 2020 in the United States is no misinformation and no allegations of election fraud. Got that? And I want to shift over to the second feature. All of that said, now I'd like to talk about massive election fraud, but not in a U.S. election. No, this is a bit of history. This is about the 1947 legislative election in the nation of Poland. Now, some of you may not know, back in the 40s, there was something called World War II, very unpleasant. And on the heels of that came 1947 and this election. And this is whereby the communists swept to power. And I have just, oh, there we go. I keep losing this stuff. The communists swept to power in Poland by utilizing methods and tactics that some people might say constituted election fraud. Who says that? Well, Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is a trusted source of information. You may always trust Wikipedia to provide you with the right solutions and answers. I looked up their take on the 1947 Polish election and communist fraud. Let me just read you what they say. Opposition candidates and activists were persecuted until election day. Only the Communist Party and its allies were allowed to campaign unhindered. The publicized results were falsified, with the official results known to select government officials long before the actual elections took place and before any votes were counted. The real results were not known to anyone. In areas where the government had sufficient control, some of the ballot boxes were simply destroyed without being counted, or they were exchanged with boxes filled with prepared votes. It's called ballot stuffing. And where possible, government officials simply filled in the numbers in the relevant documents per the instructions from Soviet and communist officials without bothering to count the real votes. Fraud, fraud, and more fraud. I've got a link to this Wikipedia page, and I'm sure they won't change that. So these are patterns that you sometimes might see in an election. This is a great example from Poland in 1947. And they at Wikipedia, there's a chart of the parliament, and after that election, it goes like 99% red communist. All of the other parties were just swept aside. Only a few seats remained. They became totally irrelevant. One of the parties that was swept aside was a nationalist populist people's party called the Polish People's Party. And they represented the little folks, the folks out in the small towns and the farms. And they had been around for a number of decades. And one of their leaders was a man named Alex Wojcicki. And he had a hard time during the war, and he certainly suffered during this election and afterwards. I have another link to an article about what they called people like Mr. Wojcicki. The term was, I won't bore you with the Polish, but it was the spiteful dwarves of reaction to communism. They said that these people that don't like communism are just spiteful. They're dirty little dwarves, and they're reacting inappropriately. And that's why we have to suppress them and censor anything they might say after all of the election fraud took place. So Mr. Wojcicki and all of his friends endured horrible suffering and censorship before, during, and after the election. But he was a good man, and he stuck it out in his, they don't have the best information on him, but it appears that he stuck it out in his country until the end. However, his family decided to flee. They wanted to get away from the communists, which is a good thing to do. And eventually many of them immigrated to the United States and eventually settled in California. And it's interesting how these things all come full circle. People move up and move on. Today, this politician from Poland in the 1940s, who endured terrible fraud and censorship, today one of his granddaughters is the current CEO of YouTube. And as Paul Harvey used to say, now you know the rest of the story. And I've got some great other stories It's hard. I'm trying to really look at the camera. Not exactly with the light on. With the shadows out of the way, I can't exactly see where the little bubble thing is, but I'm working on it. Other items in the news, and a lot of this is just boring stuff. Today is December 14th, and this is the day that the electoral college votes are cast. And we have certification, safe harbor on the 8th, as YouTube and the Associated Press wisely pointed out. We have the election results. So I'm pre-recording this. I don't know what time the college will vote, but we know they will vote for the Biden-Harris ticket, our new president-elect and vice president-elect. Yay for democracy. I don't even have a link for that. Oops. It's all over the news. You'll see it. Now, somebody else, this is another Associated Press story, which we can trust. Somebody filed some kind of case in the U.S. Supreme Court last week. It was initially accepted, and then it was denied out of hand in a 7-2 vote. And that's just boring stuff, right? Who cares about, law and order? Other exciting news came out of Congress. Nothing is safe while the legislature is in session or being voted on, asked the polls back in 47. But last week, the Senate passed a supermajority vote, which is veto-proof, on the 2021 National Defense Authorization Act. Now, what is a supermajority? That means it's enough votes where they could override a presidential veto if they needed to, which sends a message to the president that he might as well accept it and sign it because it's going to become law anyway. Well, what is this authorization? They do these every year. The past 2 decades, excuse me, there has been all kinds of things placed in these NDAAs. The big ticket in this year's bill is $740 billion for the military and many contractors to continue their work defending the country and, invading other countries. Now, that's just the straight line yearly appropriation. For any, individual war. There's always more funding. So you could be looking at more than $1 trillion next year spent on war. But it also, in addition to all this graft, all this tax money wasted, they're going to delay withdrawals of troops from various countries. And what are those countries? Well, Afghanistan, Germany, places where we desperately need to have so many thousands of troops. Don't want to get them out early. And there was also something that did not pass. Something was beaten down. I don't understand what these numbers mean, but it's something about the numbers 2, 3, and 0. Didn't pass. Don't worry about it. Sounds like something off of Sesame Street. Who cares, right? It's just more secure democracy in America. Something to be happy about. But I saw another story, shifting gears again. Bill Gates is not all that happy. He's been kind of down in the dumps lately. And it's all about a bleak next year, a bleak future, especially around these holiday times. And I have a story here from Reuters. Yes, it's true. Medical experts and scientists who we can trust are cautioning against gathering at Christmas and against celebration. This isn't really the year to be celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ, because they, if you gather together, just like Thanksgiving, you're going to spread communicable diseases, and that's much more important than worshiping Christ. And I'm sure some of these experts would tell you it's more important than believing in him. But it's all for our own good. That's Reuters, which is like the AP. You can trust them. You can also trust the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which gets most of its information from the AP. We can thank the government, from whom all blessings flow, because just this weekend, the wise and just U.S. FDA finally gave hasty approval to Pfizer's vaccine. That is wonderful. It is going to be smooth sailing from here on out. It's going to get even better because the Moderna vaccine is on track for approval right. In fact, by the time you're watching this, we may have 2 vaccines. But wait, there's more. I saw that Johnson & Johnson has a 3rd vaccine coming, and I'm sure that will be approved because science, it's just great. a final shifting of the gears, totally out of all of this other stuff. This is a winter prepper story. The final word of the day is snow. And I've got a link, AccuWeather. The weatherman is predicting that here in the grips of early winter, the Northeast may see a big snowstorm, which is usual. You expect to see snow in winter, but if it's really big like they say, then depending on how you look at it, you either need to watch out or you need to get ready to play. So take a look at that, and it's possible that many of you are going to see a white Christmas, and that will just be wonderful and joyous. And that's pretty much all I have for today. I want to thank everybody. So glad to be back in the good graces of the very good folks at YouTube. So happy to have all of you listening to the podcast at Anchor and Spotify. And I really want everybody to get on board with the community and keep checking freedomprepper.com. Hello, angry prepper folks. Good to have you here. And, you know, about that, I'm going to let it all go about that November 18th video. Let bygones be bygones. I had kind of toyed with the idea of maybe an apology was in order. But, YouTube, you don't have to worry. You don't have to apologize for that. I'll move on, and we'll be back on Tuesday with more here at Prepper Post News, Freedom Prepper, and the YouTube channel. See you then.